All right. Well, we will get started and hopefully get finished at some point. Proverbs 31 is a lot of verses in a sense, but now we get to the good parts of Proverbs 31. Last week's about leadership, and of course this week we're dealing with the virtuous woman, which I kind of like how it's Lemuel saying it. It's the idea that his mother basically said the one thing you need in life is a good wife, and it's kind of interesting when you look at Genesis 2. Adam has everything he ever needs, right? The Bible talks about how the Garden of Eden is a place of wealth. He talks about all the different metals there. He talks about all the fruit there, all the things there, all the things that Adam needs. And then there's one thing he doesn't have, and it's a wife. And of course, then God forms Eve from Adam's side, and Adam's complete. In fact, that's where we get the word complementarian, right? Complement, a completer. Because men just aren't men without wives. And so men tend to be boys without wives, actually. Wives tend to grow men up. And then children do it even some more. And so if you've ever seen a good man, it's because there's a good woman somewhere. And so who has pushed him to be that. All right, well, let's pray. We'll ask God's blessing on our time, and we'll look at this tonight. Father, thank you for your goodness to us. Thank you for the blessing of women. Lord, we live in a culture that really doesn't seem to appreciate women very much anymore. Where we want just anything to be a woman, and it's just so bizarre, the world we live in. It's so backwards. But Lord, we thank you that you have made women in your image to be unique from men, to complement man, to really make man better. We thank you for the women in our lives. Thank you for those of us that have wives. Thank you for our wives, how they bless us, how they're always there as a support to us. Lord, we also just thank you for the women that have also invested in us, whether it's our mothers or just women who come alongside to be motherly to us. We ask that you'd help us to really see the value of women. And Lord, it's amazing how you value women higher than any culture ever has over in the Middle East, and still does. And we just thank you that really you do elevate your creation to a higher status and a higher place. And Lord, help us as your people to see the value of a virtuous woman. Lord, she is precious, far more precious than anything in this world. And thank you for all that you've done for us and providing for us godly women in our own lives. And we thank you and ask that you'd help us as we study through this. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. Well, we do get to deal with the virtuous woman. And so if you're a man, it's still helpful. It's still good things. There's still qualities about a virtuous woman that I hope that you want to have, such as being industrious and being caring and things of that sort. But there is a reality that I think the church in general has lost the art of actually talking to genders altogether, because we feel like we have to generalize everything. And so a lot of churches will take passages like this and just say, well, let's learn from this woman about what we all can do. And I don't know if that's always helpful either. God does address it towards women. And so there's kind of two aspects for this. The first aspect is if you're a man, especially if you're a young man and not married, this is the kind of woman that you want to marry. And then if you're a woman and you're not married, this is the kind of woman you want to be to have a good marriage. And then if you're a woman that is married, then you should also want to be this anyways. And hopefully you're growing into this because I don't think anyone quite ever achieves what the virtuous woman is here. This is kind of the ideal. And the ideal is never really fully achieved. The ideal is always something you're trying to achieve. And so whether or not you've lived a long life as a woman, I think there's things that you can hopefully glean and learn and say, Lord, here's some areas I need to shore up in my life that maybe I've neglected, because God really does want women to do certain things, just like he wants men to do certain things. And like I said, in our culture, we've kind of lost that. We've kind of lost this idea of men and women being different. That's why men can just be women now if they put on a dress and some makeup and take some hormones. We have lost all of that because we don't really value women. And this passage as well is kind of an amazing thing in that culture, because the Bible speaks of a woman as being more valuable than rubies. If you're going to read much ancient literature, you're not going to find a whole lot of that about women. Ancient cultures did not value women. In fact, if you go to the Middle East today, women are not valued at all, unless you're in a westernized Middle Eastern culture, such as Israel. But if you're in Iran, or if you're in Iraq, or if you're over in Afghanistan, or if you're over even in China, women are not considered valuable. Women are not considered worthy of your time. Women are just property. In fact, they're as valuable as your goat or your cow. They're not really worth much. And God is the one who really does elevate women to a place of honor and really to a place of worth. And so for the Christian person, we're to look at women as something to be valued and something to be appreciated and something really to look at as more valuable than the greatest riches that you could ever have, especially if it's a virtuous woman, because her price is far above rubies, and he even says, who can find a woman like this? And I kind of like that because it gives the ideal, but also if you have a woman who is virtuous, it shows you what kind of wealth you really have. Wealth is not in what you own. Wealth is not in the number by your name. Wealth is in really who is around you. And if you have someone like this around you, you have far more wealth than most of the world. And so, even nowadays, we tend to devalue women, and women are kind of portrayed in our culture as those that run the culture. In fact, if you've seen any movies in the past 10 years, men are kind of being thrown out of movies altogether. Men are being degraded. Women are the rulers. Women are in charge. Even in the latest Snow White, I haven't seen it. My sisters went and saw it, so I got their opinion on it. And I will not see it because I don't like wasting money. And so, but they went and saw it and wasted their money. But apparently, for example, in the new Snow White movie, when she shows up to the house, usually in the original Snow White movie, what does Snow White do when she shows up to the house with all the lazy dwarves and they're not there? Yeah, she cleans. Why? Because the house is a mess. Guess what she does in this movie? She tells all the men to clean, and she goes and lies down, and she just laces around. Because we have in our culture right now this idea that women cannot debase themselves to such a lowly thing, as if it's not a good thing. By the way, do women tend to care that a house is clean? Do men tend to care all that much? No. Which shows what? It's in women's nature, in a way, to compliment men, to what? To care about certain things that men might not care about, and for women to for men to care about certain things that women don't care about. Right? God has put within us things that we care about because that's what's to actually cause us to complement each other. Right? We're not in competition, we're in complementation. Right? We're there to complete each other. We're there to do what the other one lacks in. It's kind of like two halves of a puzzle. You put them together and you have a whole piece. But without it, the puzzle's really not finished. And so that's how the Bible describes men and women. Right? We're two pieces of puzzle that kind of have to go together, and when they're together, it's a really pretty picture. And all alone, I mean, it's there. And does God call people to singleness? Sure. But even looking around in this room, most of you, in fact, all of you in here, have been married that are older than 18, except for Olivia, who is going to be married at some point, I'm sure. And so almost everyone in here has been married. I just embarrassed Olivia because I just realized that she's over 18. And so I had to single her out because she's like, what are you talking about? I'm not married. Just keep praying for her. Yeah, okay. All right, we'll move on. I've dug my grave, and we'll see what God says about women here in 1 Peter, kind of as our starting passage as we move into Proverbs 31. In fact, you can be in Proverbs 31. But I want you just to show what God looks at as virtue, the price he gives to virtue. Right? Virtue deals with strength of character. And so what you see in 1 Peter 3 is God's care for specifically women and their strength of character, because women often think their beauty is on the outside, when true beauty, of course, is on the inside. In fact, a woman who is selfish is consumed with her own beauty on the outside. You know why? Because it's a very selfish thing to want to be looked at and adored and all those things. But a woman who invests in her own character instead of investing in her beauty shows a different type of character, because character benefits those around you. Beauty just benefits you. And so there's a difference between the two. So in 1 Peter 3, Peter talks about the kind of woman that is to be honored by God. He says, who's adorning? Let it not be that outward adorning of plaiting the hair, right? Because in that day they would put gold on their hair. They'd plait their hair, put beads, all sorts of things on it, and of wearing of gold or of putting on of apparel, because that's how most women think that their beauty is shown, right? They get a new piece of jewelry, they get a new dress, they get whatever it is, and even on Easter Sunday will be the day when all the women will show up in all their new things. In fact, I say Easter Sunday is the most immodest day of the year, because the one day that should be about Jesus, we all make it about us and what we're wearing that day. And not to offend any of you, okay? But he's dealing with, right, being modest here, right? To show the thing that matters is not what's out here, it's what's on the inside. But he says, but let it be, right, let the beauty, the adorning, be the hidden man of the heart. And he's not saying man as in masculine, but human, right, the person of the heart. And that which is not corruptible, even the ornament of a meek and quiet spirit, which is in the sight of God of great price, right? God does not care about the beauty on the outside. God cares about the beauty on the inside. And it is very hard at times to reframe our thinking from what the world says to us to what God says. In fact, if you look at any female magazine, that is meant to get females' attention. It's all about losing weight and being prettier, and it's all about the outward. Every single aspect of it is about the outward. Whereas God says that's not what he finds valuable. What God finds valuable is what's on the inside, right? What we would call the virtuous woman. And here he says a meek and quiet spirit, right? Just a very gentle woman. And nowadays, we don't have very many gentle women. We tend to have very masculine women who, for better or worse, sometimes it's maybe, I guess you could say it's necessary because sometimes men are weak. But for better or worse, we live in a culture of masculinated women where they just basically are men. And they just do what men do and act like men and behave like men instead of behaving the way God intended, which is someone who is basically sweet, gentle, kind, what really is meant to soften a man to be what he should be too, because men also can be hard, and a good woman softens a hard man. So the first thing we'll look at tonight as we look at the virtuous woman here in Proverbs 31 is that a virtuous woman, she seeks to benefit everyone around her. In fact, our culture today is so selfish that if you look at homes and everything else, it's all about you, right? You look at homes and how people conduct their homes. You just go on Facebook or Instagram for just a moment, and it'll talk about how hard your life is and how people just need to care about you and how your children should care more about what you're doing and your husband should care more about what you're doing, and nobody cares enough about what you're doing, as if they're just trying to downplay it. And by the way, I'm not saying that men and children should not appreciate their mothers. But I am saying our culture is trying to make it seem like the work that you do and the things that you do are not cared about, so it kind of turns the focus off of others and to yourself. Because that happens in churches, by the way. If someone's not thanked for what they do, they tend to get very like, oh my goodness, I can't believe I wasn't thanked for that. But the virtuous woman's the kind of woman that she just does what she's supposed to do anyways, because she loves those around her. Often being a mother and being a wife is a thankless job, isn't it? How many of you mothers and wives feel like you should be thanked more often? How many of you would appreciate, I guess that way, how many of you would appreciate if you were thanked more often? Yeah, right? Because being a wife and being a mother is often a thankless job, but a virtuous woman, it doesn't matter what someone does for her, she does what's right anyways. That's where virtue is. It's strength of character, where you find your strength not from the applause of people, but from really the God who gives the strength. And God gives the strength for this kind of character. So the first thing we're going to see, the virtuous woman is preciously rare. In fact, in verse 10, it says, "Who can find a virtuous woman? For her price is far above rubies." And I think it's interesting how this is the next thing after leadership, because behind every great and wonderful leader is, honestly, a very great and wonderful woman. You don't just have wonderful men who lead places and things without someone else who's behind them to make them successful. And so even when it comes to this woman, right, he says, who can find a virtuous woman? As if she's hard to find. And by the way, in our culture, I would say this is very hard to find. By the way, even in churches, this is kind of hard to find at times, to find someone who meets all of these qualities. Now, when I say this, understand I mean all of these qualities. You'll find women who are very good at individual parts of these things. Okay, but that's not what a virtuous woman is. A virtuous woman is all of these things at the same time. And so when I say there's not many virtuous women, what I mean is that there's not many women who are all of these things at the same time. You'll have women who are good at one of these things, or part of these things, but you'll rarely find a woman who is good at all of these things. Why? Because this is something that takes discipline. You have to choose to be this. This is not something that's just going to happen to you because God zaps you, or someone throws some holy water on you, okay? This is something you have to decide to do. But her price is far above rubies, right? She's extremely valuable. And again, this is a culture that doesn't value women at that time, so it shows you how God views this. A woman who has virtue, a woman who has strength of character, there's nothing to be compared to her. Her price is far above rubies. In fact, you could not afford her if you could try, because it's not something that can be purchased. Character can't be purchased, by the way. Character is something that is full of wealth that you can't ever buy. It's either something you are or it's something you aren't. And so this woman is something that is far above value. Second, her husband is greatly benefited by her. In fact, it's interesting how the husband's the first thing mentioned, and I think that's a fitting thing, because the most important person in your marriage is your spouse. In fact, here he says in verse 11, or we'll get to that in a second when he talks about him trusting her and things like that. But I do want to start with the idea that the most important person in your marriage, women, is not your kids. We live in a culture that says the most important people in the house are your kids. By the way, are your kids important? Okay, yes, I'm not saying they're not. But the most important person in your house, if you're a woman, is your husband. Why? Because he's supposed to be able to trust you. He's supposed to be able to see the benefit that you give him. By the way, when things are right between you two, things are often better in the rest of the household. You know why? Because if mom and dad are getting along, kids aren't wondering, if mom and dad going to get divorced next year or this week or whatever it is. The kids aren't wondering whether or not that you care about them because they know that you love each other. Right? They're not worried if home is a stressful place. By the way, I grew up in a fighting home. Home was stressful, which, by the way, I would still take that stress over divorce. Okay, I've been through both. I would still take the stress over divorce. But it can be very stressful when you come home and mom and dad are fighting all the time. And so home doesn't end up being a safe place. But when her husband is her focus, because what she does in life is for him, which, by the way, that is against anything our culture says. Our culture says everything in life is about you, right? Have your career and your things and the stuff that you want. And God makes clear, if you're a woman and you're married, the number one priority in your life is not your job and it's not your kids, it's your husband. And here's what happens to a woman who is devoted to her husband as a virtuous woman. First, he trusts her. By the way, trust can't be bought. Trust itself is also invaluable. Trust can be broken, and when it's broken, it's hard to get back. And it doesn't matter what you lavish on someone with gifts or things, it's hard to gain trust back. But a man who can trust his wife, that's invaluable. And by the way, it's invaluable especially today because we live in a culture where men don't feel like they can trust women. In fact, a lot of young men are foregoing marriage because they feel like if they get married, women will use them until they're about 40 years old, divorce them, and take their house, their kids, and their money for the rest of their life. You listen to the average young man talk, that's their view of things. Why? Because they don't trust women. By the way, I'm sure the opposite's also true, okay? Women probably don't trust men very much either. But what I'm saying is there's something invaluable about a woman with character because a man knows that he can trust her with his livelihood, with his emotions, with his soul, with his kids, with everything he has. And so the first part of verse 11 says this, the heart of her husband doth safely trust in her. If I like the word safely as in, he trusts her and he's right to trust her because it's a safe thing to do because of her character. She would never do something to hurt him. She would never do something to harm him. Which, by the way, shows why he can trust her, because he understands and believes that she has his best interest at heart. And by the way, when you believe that whoever you're with has your best interest at heart, it's very easy to trust them. It's easy to trust when they have to correct you, say hard things to you, any of those things that you can trust that person and trust what they have to say because you can see their character. And so the heart of her husband, who her husband is, safely trusts in her because he can see what she does. And then he goes on, that he trusts in her so much that he kind of emphasizes that he has so much good because of what she's done that he doesn't have need of any extra, which is the idea that he says here, so that he shall have no need of spoil. Right? He trusts her so much with all that she does, he doesn't think he needs anything else in this world. Right? When he sees other things, he doesn't think, oh, I need that, or I need to do this or that, because his wife is so valuable to him that she's taking care of a lot of those things anyways. Right, the Bible will talk about in this chapter about how she thinks so into the future that she makes sure that her kids and her family has clothes for winter and things for this and things for that. And she'll be like a ship that'll go into a far country and bring things for her family. So when he looks at the different things that people might bring his way, he says, I don't need that. My wife's already taken care of that. I don't need these things. I don't need another wife. Why? Because she's given me all that I need. That's the idea of a virtuous woman, is you don't have a need of another spouse, kids, family, things, whatever it is, because you're content because you can trust her. Beyond that, the motivation of her is to only do what is good toward her husband. Right? She doesn't seek to be petty. She doesn't seek to be undermining. She doesn't seek to hurt. She seeks only what is his good, which, by the way, that's what marriage is. Marriage is selflessness to each other, okay? And the man tends to go out and work to the bone. Men tend to, for the most part, work really hard jobs and do hard things that a lot of women can't do. Why do men do that? Because they love their wives, and so they sacrifice their own bodies at times. For example, we have some men in our church that work construction and things for years, and their bodies at this point in their life are pretty much shot. You know why? Because for the sake of their families, they did what? They gave of their bodies for their whole life. Sacrifice of themselves. And you'll find quite often that those things aren't appreciated either. But what she's supposed to do is see what? To see that her goal in life is not to be selfish, it's to be selfless as well. To what? To seek her husband. In verse 12 it says she will do him good and not evil all the days of her life. In fact, the word for good here is not the idea of moral good, it's just good things. In fact, it's the same word that's used in when a Jew will say good day. So it's the word tov. And a Jew, if you ever talk to a Jew, they might say shalom to you, but they'll also say boker tov, right? Good morning, good day. Have a good day. Have a blessed day. However you want to look at it in those kind of terms. And that's the idea, is that she does what benefits him. She seeks what benefits him in every area of life. So what does he need here? What does he need there? How can I make his day better here? How can I make his day better there? How can I make his life better? How can I make his home better? How can I make his kids better? Whatever it is, it's how can I make it better? How can I make it good? How can I make it what it should be? In fact, better than it should be. Which is why I like what it says, she will do him good and not evil, right? Because evil is all the bad things. In fact, this is the same word when God will speak of how he does evil to people. He doesn't mean he does sin. It's just when he judges, that's not a good thing, is it? When God judges, is that like, woohoo? No, it's like, what is going on? Why are all these bad things happening? That's the idea, is that a woman who will do bad things instead, right? She'll manipulate, she'll be cruel, she'll be undermining, she'll be rejecting, right? All the things that you could think of that are bad that a woman might do to a husband. Maybe she pits her own kids against her husband. By the way, have you ever seen families do that, where spouses pit their kids against each other? I mean, what a screwed up home. But what you see here is that her goal is to do him good, not evil, all the days of her life. Why? Because she's going to seek his best while she's living. Because it kind of shows the purpose of her life is what? To love her husband. Which, by the way, I hear this from women often. I hear women say, I have no purpose. I've heard women say that to me in the past 2 weeks. I have no purpose. If you have a spouse, if you have children, you have the greatest purpose you will ever have. The fact that you look at that and say, I have no purpose, shows you don't value what God has given you. And you don't realize what God has given you. I'm not saying that to be mean, I'm saying that to be honest. Have a higher view of what God's given you. And see what your purpose is, which is what? To be the completer to the one that God has given you. Beyond that, the focus of her labor is not herself, it's her household. Which, by the way, if most men that are married are honest, they don't work for themselves, they work to provide for their families. They work to provide for their kids, which is the same reason why overworking and doing too much is also sin. Why? Because why do you work? Well, you work to provide, you don't work to just gain money. You work to do what you have to do. Why? Because the goal of life is to enjoy what? Your family. Not to enjoy all the things, not to enjoy all the stuff, to enjoy your family. And so for her as well, the focus of her labor is not her. It's those around her. Why? Because that's what a virtuous woman is. She's not self-centered. She cares about those around her. Because again, the idea of the outward beauty is it's all about me, so people look at me. The idea of the inward beauty is that I can, what? Do for others. There's a difference. Because one is self-focused, one is others-focused. So in verse 13, as we see what she does, well, she wants to obviously help her family. And by the way, I chose the word wants on purpose because it's her willing desire. She's not forced to. Any woman, by the way, that is forced to do things for her household, it's just not fun. It's miserable for everyone around. In fact, that's why the old adage is, if mom's not happy, nobody's happy. And if a woman has to do a job that she doesn't want to do you think everybody else enjoys having to be part of that? No. The idea of the virtuous woman is that she wants to help her family. Not that she has to, that she wants to. And that's why it's the character of the heart. Why? Because if the character's not here, it's a duty. If the character is here, now it's a desire. That's the difference between someone who has character and someone who doesn't. Because someone who has character might just do it because it's their duty. Or someone who doesn't have character. I think I said that backwards. Someone who doesn't have character might just do it because it's their duty. But someone who has character does it because now it's their desire. That's what character does. It has you desire the right things, not just have to do the right things. So in verse 13, it says, she seeketh wool and flax and worketh willingly with her hands. Right? So she's now gathering these materials. In fact, he's going to kind of talk about her having materials and spinning materials and making things and doing things. Why? Because she wants to help her family. By the way, is gathering wool a pleasant task in that day? No. What do you have to do to get wool? You have to shear sheep. Are sheep just like the most gracious thing for a woman to want to be around? No. Even with flax, you have to go harvest things and get things, and it takes work and labor. It takes sweat. It takes hard work. to get those things, it says that she takes those things and she works willingly with her hands. And I like how he chooses that word willingly because it's this idea that it's not forced on her. She wants to do this for her family. Again, that's what makes work easy, by the way, is when you want to do it instead of have to do it. And so if you see the value of your family, your husband and your children, then what? When you are in the midst of labor, now it's not labor, it's what? Well, it's just willing work. It makes it so much more joyful, not just for you, by the way, but for everyone else around you. Beyond that, she'll go to great lengths to help her family. So it's not just that it's willing, it's that there's nothing that's going to stop her to do what her family needs. Right? She's not going to make excuses. Why? Because she's going to do what she has to do. It's the same reason that when women are sick, do women tend to get a break? No. When men are sick, right, we get the cold and it's like, oh, the world has ended. This is the closest to death I've ever been. And now my joke in that with my wife is, so women, don't shoot me. I'm going to say this, okay? Don't shoot me. Okay, I tell my wife, right, because obviously she says when women are sick, we just do all this stuff. And I said, when men are sick, right, we get weak. And I say, well, you just don't understand how strong it is to be a man, that we have that far to go and we're out of strength. You guys are used to feeling this all the time. And then she usually slaps me and says that I... Here's what it says. She's like the merchant ships. She bringeth her food from afar. Right? The merchant ships go out of their way. They go into all these ports and places to get all the things that might be needed for that city. And so the Bible describes a virtuous woman as in she's willing to do whatever she has to do, go wherever she has to go whatever lengths she has to go to make sure her family has what they need. Why? Because she wants to provide for them. And so she doesn't make excuses. Instead, she goes and she makes sure that her family's taken care of. There is no limit to what she will do for her family. Now, that doesn't mean immorality, okay? I guess you could take that and take it to a weird extreme, but I guess I should say that. But it does mean that she's going to do all that she can with her energy to make sure that her family's taken care of and have what they need. Third, because she's willing to go through great lengths, well, it makes sense at the end of those things that she works very hard. By the way, if you don't ever work hard, you probably aren't virtuous. I don't mean that to be mean. I just mean that to be honest. Virtue requires hard work. Now, I'm not saying that we need to just have our work be hard for the sake of it. I mean, we all thank God for washing machines and for dishwashers and anything else that can make life easier. But it is amazing to me in our world of convenience that people act like it's really hard to do those things. Do you realize what people used to have to do? And take their laundry to the lake or to the well or whatever it was and sit there and scrub and scrub and scrub and scrub and scrub for hours. I mean, their day was filled with doing things. And now in our life of convenience, we act like, oh my goodness, it's so hard to press this button. Oh, I think I need to go lie down and have a cup of coffee. I'm saying all that to say I don't think that we often work very hard. And we should work hard. Why? Because it honors God, first of all. And it honors God because God wants us to. And he wants us to because it benefits those around us. Now, I'm not saying you need to go to bed every night exhausted, and if you're not, then you don't love God, because there are people that say that, and we do live in an age of convenience. Okay, you don't need to make life hard for the sake of it. But you should work hard, and you should do what needs to be done. In Proverbs verse 15, he says this, she riseth also while it is yet night, and giveth meat to her household, and a portion to her maidens. By the way, that is hard work. To what? To get up, but when nobody else is awake. In fact, I had this conversation with my wife today, because I don't tend to wake up when the boys are up. I don't even hear it, okay? But she does, and she says, I only get to sleep in like 3-hour intervals, right? And that's just life. But guess what? Because she loves our family and she loves our kids, guess what she does? She gets up and does what needs to be done. Now, maybe she's not always happy about it, but she does. And maybe that's an area, too, where we grow in virtue over time. It becomes something that we want to do, and it's not just a, oh, no, kind of thing. Why? Because they want to provide for those around them. They want to take care of those things. So a couple applications here at this point. First of all, if you're a wife, obviously make your husband a priority. By the way, if you cannot honestly say that your husband is the number one thing, okay, I get you could say, well, what about God, okay? Besides God, okay, let's get off the spiritual high horse and let's get on to just where we are. Your husband, you should be able to say, is the number one most important thing to me, outside of obviously Christ. And if you can't say that, then your husband's not a priority. Right? You already know one area of virtue and character you need to increase in, to say, there needs to be something in me that changes to say, my husband is my number one priority. And he's your number one priority, and this is how it shows, that you focus on how you can do him good so that he has confidence in you, right? He can trust you, right? His heart can safely trust you, where he's not worried. He's not wondering what you're doing with your day, wondering if she's just lazing around all day. I wonder if she's doing anything today. No, he knows, hey, my wife is doing all that she can for our family. She loves me. She's faithful to me, right? There should be no doubt in his mind, because if you seek his good, there'll never be a doubt in his mind. Why? Because he can see what you do. Then beyond that, after your husband, well, now you have your household. So then you give to your household out of a willing heart. And that's the caveat that I think is very important. How many of you women want to do those things? I mean, just being honest, that you can say the things that you do for your family, those are things that you actually want to do, and it's not just a, oh my goodness, can't believe I have to do this again. I can't believe my husband left his socks there again. I can't believe this. I can't believe that. I can't believe, I can't believe, I can't believe. That's how most women in our culture talk. You know what it shows? They're not very grateful with what God has given them. Instead, they wish they never had it. And instead, the willingness is to do good anyways. By the way, am I saying that we should do good and just let people be slobs? That's not what I'm saying. But I am saying that you should want to do good for your family. And it is seen in your attitude, which is really here and here. So you give out of a willing heart to make sure they have all they need and that they're taken care of. By the way, this also means that you don't get to be petty, right? If someone didn't do something, you know what you do? You do it for them anyways, and then you can go correct them, but you don't sit there and just stew and say, well, I'm just going to sit here and wait till he figures it out. And wait till he realizes that I asked him a month ago, and I will just sit here till it's done. You know what that is? Petty. I hate petty, okay? Maybe that's why I'm on that soapbox. I hate petty, but I don't think God cares for petty either. You know what it shows? It shows a very bad heart and a bad attitude, and you should want to help your family. Second, and this is important too, because again, I think in our culture, outward beauty is so focused on, right? When you look at magazines, you turn on the TV, whatever it is, outward beauty is the focus. That's why everybody's on Ozempic, by the way. By the way, is anyone, I shouldn't ask if anyone in here is on Ozempic, so I'm not going to ask. But that's why everyone's on Ozempic, right? Because it's like, well, I want to lose weight so I look beautiful. And I look these things and all this stuff. But the reality is we should realize how precious character is. It can't be bought. It's something that has to be worked on and disciplined with. And beyond that, it's more rare than beauty because it takes more discipline to beautify one's heart than to beautify one's face. I knew girls every day that would wake up at 5 in the morning. By the way, I know girls to this day whose husbands have never seen them without makeup. That is ungodly. You know why? Because he's got to realize what he actually married, okay? But I knew women in college who every day would wake up at 5 a.m., do their makeup for 2 hours, and then go to class. And by the way, those were some of the most annoying people I've ever met in my life. You know why? Because all they cared about was out here. And the thing that if they would just spend 2 hours maybe on the word and prayer, something else would improve, which is in here. And maybe then they would actually be somewhat attractive, but I just looked at them and it was like, yeah, you just put a gold ring in a pig's nose. Right? That's what it was like dealing with them. It's like, yeah, you're attractive, but you're not attractive. And I've seen, too, women who maybe aren't the best lookers in the world that even like the most attractive guys like, I want that. You know why? Because believe it or not, one day you're going to have to live with whoever you marry, so you better marry right. Even when I dated my wife, I had like specific things that it's like, I would like check off like, nope, I'm not going to date them, I'm not going to do that with them, whatever it is. Just things that were just my own list of things that it's like things that I can and cannot live without. And one of the things that I found most annoying, and this isn't sin per se, was women who would ask for my number. And I don't know why, I just found it super annoying because it's like, look, if you can't let me have any sort of lead in this, then I don't want anything to do with you. And my wife was the only girl in college in 10 weeks that did not ask for my number. I married her. So, I mean, obviously, that's a good litmus test. I have a great wife. So that's all you need to know, Josiah, is just decide that whoever gives you their number, they're not worth marrying. And you need to ask for their number first. And make them wait. Wait 10 weeks and say, are they going to ask? My wife never asked. And so I finally asked for her number. Now we're married. So there you go. That's free. That's not even in Proverbs. That's almost better than Proverbs, okay? So, all right, second. A virtuous woman's industrious in her work so that she's not afraid of the future, right? Here comes the character of actual work. And you'll find that because she works and because she labors, there's one thing she's never worried about, and that's tomorrow. By the way, how many of you women are worried about tomorrow? Maybe a little bit. See, even Carolyn's not made it, okay? So there is no hope for any of us. I know what you're saying. But there is this reality that there is a natural anxiety within women, more so than men. There just is. Women tend to worry about things that'll never happen. Now, men do too sometimes, but just from observation, it's usually women more than men, and men have to kind of be there to say, let's not worry about this. What are we worried about? Let's just calm down here. Let's just settle this. What is going on? By the way, men, how many of you have to do that with your wife sometimes? No one's raising their hand because no one wants to get in trouble. So you're all like, my wife is perfect. She would never worry. Okay, well, good. I'm glad you all have virtuous women. And so, but there is this reality that women do tend to worry about things. So the Bible says that if a woman is industrious, she's already taken care of those things that are there to worry about. And there's really no reason to worry because she's already planned for those things. And so here's what he starts with first. He says it's this idea that she plans her labor and then she diligently accomplishes it. So it's not just, well, I planned it out and I don't know where to start, because that's what happens too sometimes. Some people, they're great at planning things, but they never do anything with their plans. Okay, so there's two sides of this. You have the person who just plans, doesn't do anything, and says, I don't know where to start. I was planning to do this today, and I didn't get any of it done. Now, I'm not saying that things never come up in life, so don't take that to an extreme. But there is something to be said about planning something and also accomplishing something. Now, then there's the opposite side of that. Whereas if you never plan, then you miss things, don't you? So they both kind of have to go together, because you can just work, never plan out what actually needs to be done, and then you miss sometimes the most important thing that should have gotten done. And so here's what it says in verse 16. First we see how she plans. It says, she considereth a field and buyeth it. With the fruit of her hands she planteth a vineyard. So first you could see how she is kind of looking out at what to do, right? So she's using her wisdom to even look at potential things to buy and potential things to do. And she's kind of planning out what is the best thing here. And so she's considering options, and then she chooses the best thing. And then it says, with the fruit of her hands she planted the vineyard. So then she goes, and then she also works for that plan to make sure that it's coming to fruition. So she's planning it, she's putting the work in, but even then, she then strengthens herself to actually do the work. Because by the way, isn't that needed sometimes? Right? You're ready to do the work, you're ready to do the stuff, and you're like, I don't know if I can do this, I'm kind of tired right now. But how many of you ever feel that way? Okay? Yeah, it's like, I can't do this, I'm really exhausted. But what she does is she doesn't give up. The Bible says she girds her loins, right? It's kind of like she pulls up her robe, right? Okay, we're going to get this done. Why? Because she doesn't use that tiredness as an excuse. You know what she does? She finds strength somewhere else and does it anyways. By the way, you need to learn to find your strength not in you. You know why? Because if all you do is find your strength here, this is very feeble. And you'll get tired and you'll get worn. But if you can find your strength in other things, such as motivation, maybe even from your family, why am I doing this? It tends to give you a strength that you don't get just from sleep and food and the things that you think, well, if I just did those things, I'd have the strength I need. No, you have to have purpose to have strength. Why? Because when you do things for others, it kind of gives you that little extra oomph. In fact, Jesus even has this happen to him when he's ministering to people. Right? The Bible says after his disciples were out, of course, preaching in all these cities and all these places, they come back together and they're all exhausted. And then a bunch of people meet them in the desert. Right? 5,000 men, besides women and children, meet him in the desert. And his disciples say, well, can't we just send him home? And Jesus, because his purpose is not just to go rest, his purpose is what? To reach people. He says, well, you guys feed them. And they say, are you crazy? With what? Right, we don't even have enough money here to buy for all these people. And of course, then Jesus does the miracle there. Why? Because for him, he found his strength in doing what God said. In fact, he says, my meat is to what? To do the will of him that sent me. He says that in John 4 when he says, I'm not hungry anymore. Why? Because you need to find your strength outside of yourself, whether that's the Lord giving you strength and saying, God, I just need your help right now, or beyond that, even finding the motivation of, well, this is why I'm doing this. This satisfies my soul. I can do this. She girds her loins with strength, and she strengtheneth her arms. Why? Because she's having to do this. I think it's interesting, too. It says she strengthens her arms as if her arms didn't want to. Right? She has to put the strength in there and say, okay, you're going to do this. We're going to accomplish this. Why? Because we could make excuses all day long about how tired we are. By the way, are people generally tired? Like whenever people see me, they say, wow, you look tired. And usually I'm like, because I am. But why do you keep doing stuff? Why? Because it's not the tiredness that stops you. It's what? I have to what? To strengthen what's here and go do it anyways. Why? Because that's what life is. By the way, that's what parenting is. How many of you parents understand that? That when you're tired, you just do it anyways. See, Sean's really raising his hand right now. He's got a 3-month-old. He is in the ringer right now, and I don't envy you. And so there is this reality that you have to just strengthen what's there. And then beyond that, because she believes the fruit of her work is good, it also seems to embolden her to keep working. In fact, in verse 18, it says that she perceiveth that her merchandise is good, and here's the result. Her candle goeth not out by night. Why? Because she sees that what she's doing is good. So what does it cause her to do? To keep working, to keep going, to keep doing what needs to be done. Why? Because she finds her purpose in the job that's already been well done. Right? She sees it and says, wow, this is good. Okay, I got to finish this. By the way, how many of you women have ever started a project and it's late at night, you're like, I got to finish this. Yeah, it just kind of eats up at you and you're like, okay, I got to get this done. And that's kind of how the Bible describes the virtuous woman, as she's doing things and she's finding strength to do things. And what kind of keeps her going is that as she's doing it, she's looking at it and says, wow, this is turning out really good. I guess I better keep going. Why? Because that's the idea of strength of character. Why? Because it's important because she's doing it for those around her. And what is good is benefiting those around her. And so it ends up becoming very important to her life. Beyond that, she sends her hands to work so she can receive the poor. In fact, there's kind of a wordplay here. The Bible says in verse 19, she layeth her hands to the spindle, and her hands hold the distaff, right? So it's talking about her different machinery that she would use, of course, to make clothing and make things. But it's interesting because the word for to lay her hands is to kind of send them off. Because usually, with the poor, is you send away the poor. But the idea is that she sends away her hands to go do work. And instead of sending away the poor, she takes care of the poor. And so what she does with her hands is she goes and sends them to do things so she can give. And so she can do things for others. So she sends out her hands to work. She gives of herself constantly to do what needs to be done. By the way, that is often why I hear people is I give of myself constantly. Good. That's what you're supposed to do, is to keep giving of yourself. By the way, aren't you glad that God gives of himself constantly? Because if God ever stopped and said, well, I just have to give of myself constantly, you wouldn't exist. You'd be dead. You'd be in hell. But God gives of himself constantly, so that should not be an excuse for us. If anything, it should say, I just want to keep giving of myself. Why? Because of who it benefits. Again, it says she stretcheth out her hand to the poor. So instead of sending away the poor, that's the idea with her hand, she sends them away. But she doesn't send away the poor. Guess what she does to them? Instead, she receives them with her hands to put out her hands and say, okay, what do you need? So she stretches out her hand to the poor, yea, she reacheth forth her hands to the needy. Why? Because they haven't been able to take care of themselves. Right? A lot of the people in that culture, by the way, that were poor, it's not because they were lazy. If you were poor in that culture, it's because you were disabled. Maybe you were deaf, blind, mute. Maybe you couldn't walk. Maybe you had some spinal disease or something. All sorts of things that could happen that what? People had to take care of you. And she pities those people. It could also be an orphan. Maybe someone's dad dies when he's working. And now you have a widow with children. And the Bible says of this woman that she what? She works so she can what? Give to those that can't. In fact, the opposite of this is the kind of person that God hates. In fact, in Amos, God called a bunch of women cows. I won't call anyone in here a cow, okay? But I will say God calls women cows sometimes. By the way, isn't that kind of the most offensive thing that anyone could ever call a woman? And God looks at them and says, hear this word, ye kine of Bashan. A kine there, by the way, is cows, you cows, that are in the mountain of Samaria, which oppress the poor, which crush the needy, which say to their masters, bring and let us drink. By the way, these are women in the context who hate those around them and hate their husbands. Like, it's interesting. A virtuous woman is supposed to be what? Helping the poor, and instead they do what? These women oppress the poor. They crush the needy, right? They're out to do harm instead of good. And the Bible says the virtuous woman, her goal is to do good and not evil. But then beyond that, it says they say to their masters. In fact, the word here for masters is the word for Baal, right? It's their husbands. In fact, understand Baal or Baal was not always a reference to the false god. That word just meant husband, right? It meant a master. In fact, Sarah calls Abraham Baal, not as a not as a bad thing. She does it to just call him a term of respect, right? Like saying my husband, right? Someone that was meant to be honored. And so these women are saying to their husbands, bring and let us drink, as in get me another drink. Guess where their focus is? Themselves. These women are only focused on themselves. Now, I know this is going to be countercultural. Women, one of your goals in life is to serve your husband. It's not to be his slave, but it's to want to benefit him and help him and be there for them. But a lot of women now, even in our culture, by the way, it's give to me, give to me, give to me. Hey, you go get this. Hey, you go do that. And that's not what God has called a virtuous woman to do. In fact, that's what God calls a cow. This kind of person who's all about themselves. Their husbands are just there for them. By the way, should husbands look at their wives as just there for them on the counter side of this? No. What does the Bible tell husbands to do? Love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself for it, which, by the way, I would say is a much stronger command than any of the things you're going to find here. But the Bible makes clear that women are supposed to be there for their husbands, to help him, to be there for them. And instead you have this woman here in Amos who what? Is all about her. All about what she can get. And I get that that is so against what our culture says. But by the way, if the culture ever says anything, just believe the opposite, and now you know what God says. Because of her planning, this is why she doesn't have any fear. She's not afraid of the future because she planned, because she did the work. Again, it says she's not afraid of the snow for her household, for all her household are clothed with scarlet. Why? Because she's been up doing what? Making the clothes, right? And talk about how she got her wool and her flax, and she's been on the machine and working on everything together. Why? Because she's already made it all. So she's not wondering, I really hope that we have enough for the winter. I hope my kids can have warm clothes and my kids can have these things. No, she's already gone out and done it. So she's not afraid of the future. Why? Because she's already taken care of all those things. And then it says, she maketh herself coverings of tapestry. Her clothing is silk and purple. So she even clothes herself and does things for herself, which, by the way, as a woman, you can't just do things for others and neglect yourself either. That's not healthy either. That's not what I'm saying. Right? You also have to what? Take care of yourself. So she's taking care of what she needs. Her husband, because of her virtue and her planning, he's known in the gates. When he sitteth among the elders of the land. Why? Because they see his wife going everywhere. And they see her doing all the things that she's doing for her family. And as a result, it also increases his reputation too. I mean, it's interesting that sometimes you have men that are known not because they're great, but because their wives are. And so she brings a good reputation to him. She maketh fine linen and selleth it, and delivereth girdles unto the merchant. Right? So she also kind of goes and brings other provision too. Why? Because any extra she has, she sells it. So guess what her family has now? Money, which, by the way, her husband's implied to be working here, but now they have more money, which means what? Why should we be afraid of tomorrow? We have everything we need. Everything's taken care of. I mean, he made money, and I took my extra and made some money too. So we're not afraid of what we're going to wear tomorrow, what we're going to do. We've already worked and labored for those things. And then verse 25, here's what her clothing really is. It's not the beautiful scarlet and the beautiful silk and the beautiful things. Strength and honor are her clothing, and she shall rejoice in time to come. What really clothes this woman? What is she really wearing all the time? Is it a bunch of nice clothes? No. It's strength and honor, right? I like strength and honor. It sounds Roman, almost like something you'd have in the military, right? Strength and honor. But this is her, right? She clothes herself with strength. Why? Because she puts on the strength. Right? Every day. Do you think it's easy to wake up and do these things every day? No, but she wakes up and says, today, I'm wearing strength. And then it says, and honor. Why? Because she carries herself in a good way too. It's not that she just is strong and can do things. She does it the right way. Right? She's honorable. She has good character. People look up to her. Why? Because she takes care of all of those around her. And I like what it says at the very end here. She shall rejoice in time to come, as in she'll just kind of be happy and joyful for the future. Why? Because she's not worried. She's able to sing in the moment. She's able to enjoy the moment. Why? Because she's not worried about tomorrow. By the way, isn't it nice not to have to worry about tomorrow? Isn't it much easier to enjoy today if you're not worried about tomorrow? It is, because if you haven't taken care of the things that are tomorrow, today, all you can think about today is what's tomorrow. So it's much better to take care of those things now to where you can actually enjoy the day and what God has given. In fact, one more thing. It reminds me of what David says, right? This is the day the Lord hath made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. It's hard to do those things if you've not taken care of the things that need to be done. So an application, well, first, I guess the only one here, but seek to be industrious. Right? You plan your time and fulfill your work. By the way, both those things are necessary. You need to plan. Okay? If you're someone that never plans, learn to plan. Because you can say, well, I get stuff done and I never plan. You would be amazed by how much more you get done if you would just plan. Okay? In fact, there's this thing online that I keep saying, and I'm always tempted to do it because I keep a pretty strong calendar, okay? Because I kind of have to. And I remind myself of things all the time. Some of you see me pull up my phone and I'll say, remind me on this day to do this thing. And everybody makes fun of me. But everybody tells me so many things, I don't remember when I'm going to do it. So I just tell myself in my phone to remind me when to do it because I don't remember. But there's things out there that will basically make a schedule for me all day long of do this here, do this here, do this here. It's one of the benefits that you could have for AI in a sense. Like AI can be a bad thing, but it can also be a thing that just helps you schedule your time. But you'll find that you'll get more done if you purpose and time to do certain things. And so if you plan, well, now you know what I'm doing here and here and here, what I need to accomplish today, and saying, I'm not going to pillow my head till this is done. And it's amazing what you would get done if you would plan. By the way, if you plan to do things and you start your day getting things done, you'd be surprised by how much time you have at the end of the day if you got everything done. So you plan your time, and then you do the work. Because you can't just plan and not do it, because I've seen that side too, where people they have a calendar and all these things, they never do anything on it. It's like, why even have a calendar? What a waste. You didn't have to kill a tree for that, okay? You could have done something better with those things. So you got to do both. And the reason is that if you do these things, you don't have to fear the future. And by the way, I think we all hope to not fear the future. And even then, you can give to those who have nothing. Why? Because you've planned so well, you have enough for yourself and everyone else. That's what Paul says in Ephesians 4. Let him that stole steal no more, but let him work with his hands, that he may provide for himself and for those around him. And the final thing, a virtuous woman is highly honored for her godly character. The thing that actually gets this woman to do what she does is not because she's so wonderful and she's so great, it's that she has character that is godly. It's not because of her wealth. It's not because she had a good education. It's because she is the right person in here. She knows when to speak and what to lovingly speak. Because that, by the way, is part of character. To have the wisdom to know when to say something and to have the love to say something. And it says in verse 26, she openeth her mouth with wisdom, and in her tongue is the law of kindness. By the way, this is the kind of woman you want talking all the time. She's very kind. She's very gracious. By the way, I've met a lot of not gracious women in my life. And they're very hard to deal with. But there is something to be said about a woman who, one, opens her mouth with wisdom, so when she speaks, she has something to say. Okay, she doesn't just speak to say. When she speaks, she has something to say, and something important to say, something good to say, something helpful to say. And then it says in her tongue is the law of kindness, as in what she says is the most loving thing ever. Right? It's the law of kindness. I like how it says that. As in, this is what always comes out. She lives her life by this. In fact, there used to be a saying, if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all, right? Right? It's kind of a law of kindness. There is these rules I'm going to live by, and the rule for the virtuous woman is I'm going to open my mouth when I can speak lovingly. Now, lovingly is sometimes hard, okay, in the sense that you have to say something hard to someone. But lovingly is also often you say good things to people. You uplift them. You encourage them. You don't tear them down and say, you idiot, I can't believe you did this. Or say to your husband, wow, you're just a buffoon. Right? Everybody wants to act like we're all just the dad from Beauty and the Beast or something. We're all just a bunch of idiots. Sean really loves that I'm referencing all these Disney movies tonight, by the way. But our tongue is the law of kindness. And the word for kindness here, by the way, is our word for chesed, right? It's this idea of family love. Everyone she talks to as if they were her own family. And not, by the way, as we would talk to our families, I guess, in our day. But in a loving way, in a caring way. When she sees people, she says, hey, what can I do for you? How can I help you out? Are you okay? Why? Because there's a concern there in her voice, in her words. So take the law of kindness, think on that, chew on that, because that goes probably to a lot of places that we don't think of. Because it covers all the areas that you can be kind to someone or be loving to someone. By the way, it's the same word that's used for God's love in the Old Testament, right? How God loves David, why David, when David kills a man and steals his wife, why God has given him mercy, because God has this kindness to him, this love. And then beyond that, her concern, as a matter of character, is always her household, and she moves to make sure it's accomplished, right? This is part of her, right? As part of her life, her person is this, what? My goal in life is to make sure that my household is taken care of, and that I do what needs to be done to make sure that's done. Verse 27, it says, she looketh well to the ways of her household, and eateth not the bread of idleness, right? She's always trying to make sure that her household is taken care of. Everybody has what they need. Everything is what it needs to be. And I like how it says she eateth not the bread of idleness, as in she's always doing something. Now, I'm not saying there's not time for rest, okay? And I don't really think that's what this is saying either. But it's not like she's just sitting there and she hasn't earned her keep. Right? She eats the bread of idleness, right? And the Bible says that a fool whose belly is full, right? It's an affront to the earth, basically. Like as someone who's lazy and they get to eat bread, that's kind of backwards, isn't it? But the Bible describes this woman as when she eats, it's not like she's eating the bread of idleness. It's not like she hasn't worked for it. She's what? She's industrious. She deserves all that she gets. In a good way. And then she receives praise for her character. In verse 28, her children arise up and call her blessed, her husband also, and he praiseth her. Or they call her blessed. They're saying, wow, you're just the most wonderful mom in the world. There's no one like you. All my friends wish they had moms like you, right? That's the kind of things they say to their mom. They're not cruel. They're not mean. And by the way, there's something about her that makes them want to say this too. Okay, this isn't necessarily forced. And I get we have to deal with character in children and shape that. But there is something about the virtuous woman that their children do tend to just love them. Why? Because wouldn't it be nice to have a mom who always talks to you in kindness, who always seeks your best, who's always there for you, who's not there to discourage you or hate you and call you an idiot or worthless or whatever it is, someone who's there to actually care for you? I mean, you think that you'd want to be around that person all the time. And then her husband, right, he praises her. He's going around telling everyone how wonderful his wife is. And telling everyone, don't you wish you had a wife like mine? I'm just joking. Probably not that far. It probably is rubbing people's face in it. But the reality that he's just always saying, you won't believe what my wife did for me today. She did this and this and this. She's just such a great wife. By the way, if you're a child, and we'll deal with this in our application, you should be praising your mother and saying good things to her and good things about her. And if you're a husband, you should be praising your wife, and if you're not, there's something wrong with you. When's the last time you said something nice to your wife and said, thank you so much for you did this? Or wow, I really appreciate all that you do over here. Or wow, you're just so great at this. How do you do that? By the way, all of us husbands are guilty of not doing that enough. And what we see is that when one combines the virtues of the virtuous woman, right, so not the individual things, her virtue surpasses the individual character points that many have because she combines it all together. Okay, I get. Some of you women in here are good at some of these things. Okay? Some of you are very good at planning. Some of you are really good at laboring. Some of you are really kind in your words. Some of you are really good at just knowing what to say. Some of you are good at all sorts of these things. But the question is, am I good at all of these things? Again, in verse 29, he says, many daughters have done virtuously. Right? There's many women out there who've done virtuous things, who have different strong points of character, but thou excellest them all. Why? Because this woman is all of those things at the same time. You might say, well, that must be the perfect woman. Well, apparently King Lemuel married the perfect woman because he acts like it's who he's married to. And there should probably be an aspect when husbands see their wives as the perfect women. But beyond that, character is more praiseworthy than beauty. Again, favor is deceitful, right? When people say nice things to you, right? That idea of flattery, it's deceitful. Beauty is vain. But a woman that feareth the Lord, she shall be praised. Why? Because people will just say nice things to you to say nice things to you. In fact, even with women who have a bad hair day, someone will say, oh, your hair looks fine. In fact, women usually do it to each other. Right? My makeup's just off today. Oh, no, you look great. Right? How many of you women have lied to someone before in that way? Yeah. How many of you women have been lied to? Yeah, okay. How many husbands have lied to their wives? Okay. And then he goes on and says beauty is vain. Why? Because beauty is really not worth a whole lot. In fact, he describes the character as immeasurable wealth. You can't even count how wealthy and valuable it is. But beauty, if you could measure that in terms of wealth, it's worth nothing. It's worthless. Right? The character is worth much, the beauty is worth nothing. Why? Because beauty on a woman without character, again, what Solomon says, is like a gold ring and the nose of a pig. Right? It's not very beautiful. Why? Because the gold ring is beautiful. But the gold ring is just a small part of the whole ordeal, isn't it? The pig is the description of the character, right? That matters a whole lot more than the beauty you put on it. But this is what he contrasts it with. What true beauty and true virtue is? Well, a woman that fears the Lord, she shall be praised. Why does a woman do these things? Who does she love first and foremost? God. Why? Because our world would have you convinced to do none of these things. Which means if you're going to do these things, you kind of have to have a presupposition that, hey, I love God and God's right, and I'm going to live life his way. Because the world says the opposite. So you already have to decide, well, I worship God, I worship no one else, I don't care what this world says, I'm living life God's way. Why? Because that's the only reason you would do any of these things. Because our world, again, if you go to Instagram, I've never been on TikTok, so I don't know. If you go to TikTok, I guess, if you want the Chinese to own all your information, and if you go to Facebook or anything else, YouTube Shorts, all those things, you will see over and over and over again of people speaking the exact opposite of what we said tonight. They want women to be selfish. They want women to basically be brutes to people, be mean to people, act like they're the only one worth anything, act as if men are degradable and beneath them. And instead God says, no, if you're a virtuous woman, you're a servant. You do everything that you can for your husband. You do everything you can for your children. You do everything you can for everyone else around you. Why? Because that means it's not about you. And then you're industrial and hardworking and planning and caring and clothing yourself with strength as if you have to put it on every day and decide every day, I'm going to be strong today. I'm going to get this done today. Why? Because what you get done in a day is often a choice. I get sometimes, right, there is a reality that we can work ourselves to sickness, but I don't think that's most of our problems. I think for a lot of it is, no, I just have to decide that I'm going to do what's right today. And I'm going to wear the garment of strength, and I'm going to wear the garment of honor, and I'm going to do what God says. But for all of this, the Bible is clear for the very last thing, is that those that have the virtuous woman, they're to reward her, okay? It's not an unrewarded thing. In fact, it's something that is very rewarding. He says, give her the fruit of her hands, and let her own works praise her in the gates. Right? When you see the virtuous woman, you know what you should do? You should reward her for what she's done. You should make sure she's well taken care of because she's well taken care of you. And then, when she does things, you don't just reward her for it, you praise her for it. And you let everyone praise her for it. In fact, you should pray that everyone praises your wife for her virtue. Why? Because if you praise what's good, guess what people also want to do? What's good. In fact, we do this with children. I used to think this was manipulative, and I changed my mind when I finally had to work with kids. When I was down at Pensacola, we used to be in charge of master clubs, first for 5-year-olds, and then somehow Mr. Smith convinced us to switch with him and do 4-year-olds. And we realized that 4-year-olds were not 5-year-olds, okay? And we had 44-year-olds in one room, okay? They're all the devil. They're all Satan, okay? And they're all at different stages of 4, by the way. Because a 4-year-old who's just turned 4 and a 4-year-old who's about to turn 5 are like the world apart, okay? It's 20% of life apart, by the way. And the reality is that what you do with children to get them to behave is you don't yell at them. You know what you do? You praise what they do. That's good. So you know what you do? You actually, in a group of kids, you ignore the bad behavior, which I know sounds very opposite. You know what you do? You look at the one kid that's doing what's right and you say, wow, Mr. McIntosh, you've just been sitting so nice tonight. You've been sitting up. You've been smiling at me. You've been looking right at my eyes. And by the way, right now he's also starting to smile and everything else. But inadvertently, you know what other children start to do when you praise those things? They start to sit up, smile, look right at you, do all those things. You know why? We like to be praised. And so when you praise what's good, guess what it gets other people to do? What's good. Whereas if all you ever do is just point out all the bad and all the wicked, well, guess what people have their attention on? All the bad and all the wicked. In fact, I watched a video before I came to church tonight. It was 7 red flags in a church, which it was all negative things. Instead, it should have been 7 things to look for in a church. Why? Because now you're taking the attitude off of what's negative and saying, hey, this is what you should look for instead of what you shouldn't look for. It's amazing that really what shepherding is, by the way, is actually leading people to something and not just saying no. You lead them to what's right instead of just saying what's bad. By the way, I'm not saying there's never a time to correct bad. But I am saying the majority of the time, if you praise what's good, people will do it. Why do you praise the virtuous woman? Because if you praise her and her character, everyone else will want to follow. So what are some applications? First, we'll deal with women. Women, from your words to your actions, do what benefits those around you, right? The virtuous woman, she uses her words the right way. She does her actions the right way. This time spent is more beneficial than time spent beautifying yourself. Right? You can spend 2 hours every morning putting on all the makeup in the world and painting the barn, okay? But you can paint the barn all you want. It doesn't change what's inside of it. I really should not have preached tonight, so. It was a bad analogy. You don't want to be called a barn? I called everyone pigs earlier, and the guy called them cows. I don't see what the problem is. Where do cows and pigs live? In the barn. I mean, it all goes together, Carolyn. It's only logical. All right. We're back to square. Hey, let's go back to the beginning. We'll start over. But the character of the heart is more precious than the beauty of the face. And if you would spend time beautifying the heart instead of the face, you'd be a more beautiful person. Second, for children, you should praise your mom for all that she does for you. I get that every woman is always probably, for their whole lives, trying to attain what the virtuous woman is. Okay, this is very much an ideal, which means we're always pursuing it. We're always chasing after it. But the same thing's true with our relationship with Christ, right? When we want to be like Christ, we're always chasing after it. That is a lifelong pursuit. That doesn't mean you give up because you didn't make it yet. If anything, you just keep wanting to pursue more. As God changes you, it's like, wow, I'm doing this part now. Let's do the next thing. But children, don't look at your parents and say, well, my mom's not all that she should be, so I don't have to praise her. No, you should praise your mother or whoever is really over you as a woman in your life for all that they do. You know why? Because you're actually really frustrating to deal with. All the moms are trying to say, I don't want to admit it, but they're all thinking it. I know. I have kids. They're frustrating. But you should be thankful for your mother every day. You should tell her how much you appreciate her every day. Why? Because they make sacrifices for you that you don't even see. Your mom, for most of your life, wiped your butt, changed your diapers, washed your clothes, washed your plates, made your food, did all those things for you, and maybe still does some of those things for you. And when's the last time you said thank you for any of it? And then finally, men, praise and reward your wife for her hard work. One, praise. By the way, praise is a big reward because women usually crave words of affirmation, right? They want to be built up and be told, women love to be told how beautiful they are. They love to be told how much you appreciate them. They love to be told thank you for all the things that they do for you. And by the way, pointing out specifics is not just saying, I'm so thankful for all the things that you do for me. Women don't care about generalities. I'm just letting you know. You know what women want? Wow, you see this crease on the bed right here. This crease. Right? That's what we want. They want you to point out the details and say, I noticed the details. But how many of you women wish that your husband would see the details of the things that you do? Most women aren't just the general. They care about the details. So look for the details, praise the details, but beyond that, reward your wife for what she does. You know what that means? Go buy her flowers. Go buy her coffee. Go take her out on a date. Go do things for her and with her and say, thank you so much for all that you do. I could not live this life without you. I would not be where I am without you there to help me. I would not have the success I have without you there to help me. Our kids would not be as wonderful as they are if it were not for you. Right? Praise her. Give her reward for what she's done. You know why? Because that's what most women want. Most women just want to be seen. And if you would see them, guess what? It makes that job of being virtuous much easier. By the way, beyond that, if your husband's not that to you, that's not an excuse to not be virtuous. But it does make it easier to be virtuous. So treat her well. Show her that her character is more valuable to you than anything else in this world. Right? By pointing out what she does, by pointing out how she says kind things and does kind things, and wow, you just handled that so well, whatever it is. But don't just praise her beauty. Because by the way, that's what men are good at. Wow, you look so great today. You look so hot. You look so this. You look so that. Don't just praise her beauty, praise her heart. And say, wow, there's no one like you. There's no one who's as sweet as you are, who's as kind as you are. There's no one I'd rather be with than you. Ever. And when you die, I'll never get remarried because there's just no one like you, right? Ruth laughed. She's like, when Ron dies, I'm just joking. No, Ruth says, that's it for me. I've been married, don't need it anymore. But how many of you are there, by the way? You're married and you're like, I'm never getting married again. I've thought that. I'm not even that old. And so, not because I hate my wife, but just that whole process of getting married is so much work. It's just like, I don't think I'd want to do that again. What? Training your man is so much work. Wow. My wife must have a really hard time. She looks tired all the time, so that must be a lot of work. So, all right. I hope this was helpful. I hope you can take these things. I think they're all so applicable. And there's things here that are true for men too, but that's not the focus. The focus is women. And I think for men, the focus is learn to praise your wives. Learn to reward your wives and do things for them. And for women, learn to do things with the right motive. Don't complain. Do it because you want to.